Thank you, Jill. Ema, I see that you have written in the chat, are we able to pre-screen electronically before a child is dropped off?
It would be best practice to screen them in person, just because then you're actually able to see the child. But if for some reason that makes your process easier and you feel safer doing that, then that's fine too.
Thank you.
All right. So just picking up where we left off about ongoing monitoring. So making sure that there's kind of a written process for isolating sick children and staff. So as I mentioned, sick staff should just leave the premise immediately. Advise them to contact either Peterborough Public Health or one of the assessment centers for testing. If it's a sick child, you're going to want to isolate them immediately. And all of this information on what to do with a sick child is laid out in the policies that Sandra sent out. So you want to isolate them in a separate room. If that's not possible, then you'll want to keep them at least 2 meters away from their cohort. Of course, there's going to be probably a provider that will be caring for the child until their parents are able to pick them up. So in that situation, daycare providers should be wearing a mask and eye protection. And if it's an infant, then they can have a blanket over them while they hold the infant if that's necessary. Just make sure that you have an area where you know you'll be able to isolate sick children while they wait. Have that mapped out. What's kind of the least traffic area in the daycare, and where would the least amount of people be exposed? And just make sure that staff are aware of that. In terms of drop-off and pickup procedures, so the operational guidance document just says that daycare should have some kind of process for parents and guardians dropping off kids. Ideally, you actually want parents to be able to drop off the kids outside so they don't have to enter the building and there's not as much traffic in a screening area. However, of course, with weather constraints and things like that, that's something that you want to be thinking about when you're looking at your facility and how you can kind of manage keeping people at a 2-meter distance while letting kids inside. Some suggestions are having cohorts enter through different doorways or using staggered entrance times, scheduling entrance times, that kind of thing. Making sure you have alcohol-based hand rub at all the entrances. So as the kids come in, just make sure that they're performing the proper hand hygiene. If their hands are sticky or dirty, then you'll want to have them wash their hands. But if they're not visibly soiled, just alcohol-based hand rub is suitable. Ensuring that physical distancing of 2 meters is kept, and try and have kids bring in as little personal belongings as possible. And if they do bring them in, of course, you guys already do this, but just make sure that they're labeled. So the next section is maximum capacity, cohort size, and ratios. So in the operational guidance document, they included a definition for cohorts. It's a little bit confusing. There were some questions around it, and there's still some kinks that need to be ironed out. But a cohort is defined as a group of children and staff members assigned to them who stay together throughout the duration of the day to day, for a minimum of 7 days. Still a little bit unclear what a minimum of 7 days it really means. But ultimately, you want to have a group of 10 individuals total that would be together day after day, so Monday to Friday, whatever it is. If there's some kids that only attend part-time, you cannot replace those children with more kids, you want to have a maximum of 10 individuals. And that's just so if there is a positive case or an outbreak situation, the maximum amount of people exposed is 10. So cohorts shouldn't be mixing, they should be kept separately. There is some questions around home daycares and the requirements for them. Now, of course, for licensed home daycares, you're supposed to be caring for less than 6 individuals or less than 6 kids, according to the CCEYA, not including your own. Now, Peterborough Public Health would recommend that we kind of stick to that cohort rule as well if you have kids attending part-time and things like that. Danielle, do you have a question?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of confusion around the cohort thing. Going back to the screener, so if I'm the screener at the front door and I screen, everything's good, I say, bye-bye, Mom, can I turn around and take that child into the building and deliver her to her room? Or do I have to have another staff to pass off?
Yeah, you can do that. Ideally, you'd have somebody from that child's cohort come and grab the child so you can kind of remain at the entrance. But you can take that child back to the room, but it would be best if you could keep a 2-meter distance from the child.
Okay. I mean, it's going to be virtually impossible at 7 a.m. for me to screen and for the staff in the room, if she can't leave the other children to come get the child, and I'm not going to have 3 staff in the building at 7 a.m. because it's not. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I can do
2 meters, yeah, you're just wanting to reduce the risk of exposure. So if you do have to make that a part of your process, just making sure that it's safe. Yeah.
And so then going back to the cohort thing, I obviously have to have an opener and a closer in each room because we're not mixing children. But then in terms of breaks and coverage and float and supply, like, can my cook be that person to go in and give them a bathroom break if the cook is in PPE, or can the cook be the runner and take the child to the room? Or
you can have somebody that relieves breaks for the staff and things like that. I'm not sure on who you can have in, like, I don't know, like regarding qualifications and that kind of thing. I don't know any of that, but
I'm just wondering about
if you can't have somebody that's kind of assigned to certain cohorts to relieve breaks, then absolutely you can bring in a staff member like a cook to relieve breaks. But ideally, let's say you have 2 staff members that are doing breaks for all of the cohorts.
Yeah.
It would be best if they could be assigned to cohorts themselves. So if they could cover breaks for cohorts 1 to 3, and the other reliever is assigned for cohorts 3 to 6, and they ongoingly provide relief, then that would be ideal, just so they're not being exposed to tons of groups.
Right. Well, we're only going to be running 2 rooms. So and like Jen just put up in the chat, is that float part of the cohort of 10?
So what we're saying is we recognize that that's difficult to do when you're bringing in people that are going to relieve your staff members. Yeah. So no, that relief person wouldn't necessarily be a part of your cohort of 10.
Okay.
Caitlin, there's sorry, Danielle, were you finished?
No, that's okay.
There's a number of people with their hand up and a number of questions in the chat. Did you want to go to those now? Or do you want to finish what you're doing and go back to them?
No, we can finish up the questions. I know there's lots of questions around the cohorting, and I'll do my best to answer them, but we can go through those questions.
So we'll start with the hands and then we'll go to the chat questions. So Sandra, I saw that you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the cohorts and the float. So that question did get asked of the ministry as well, in terms of can the float go between rooms? And they said, as Caitlin has indicated, yes, they can, but you must ensure that at no point you exceed the number 10. So if they're relieving a staff person in the room for a break, they can't come into the room and stand there and communicate with the person they're relieving, because that would exceed the number 10. So you have to make sure that it's an in and out exchange of people so that you never exceed that 10. And that the ministry does recognize, based on staffing limitations, as well as, just the cost of operating, with additional staff, that it may not be possible or realistic for some programs to have a staff member that's assigned to particular cohorts. Ideally, as Caitlin said, that is the ideal model, but they understand the staffing limitations that exist in the province.
Thank you, Sandra. Jill, did you want to add to that?
My question was more around the enhanced staffing. Another community stated today that the enhanced staff, even though they're paid by us, can make 11. We were told that we have to reduce by 1 child.
Yeah, I'm not sure about anything around enhanced staffing.
So my question is, we never can exceed 10 people in that room.
Yeah, as per the operational guide right now, yeah.
Yeah, so if you needed an enhanced staff, you have to count them as part of the 10. If it's a resource teacher that's coming in, those individuals may come in as a guest to speak to the program or whatever, but they're not seen as part of that ratio and not part of that group. But enhanced staff who you rely on all day long to support children would have to be counted as the 10. So as you're enrolling children, you'll have to think about their needs and do they require an enhanced staff, and if so, you'll have to have fewer children in that group.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. Margaret, you had a question?
Oh, sorry. My question is around the coverage for staff for their breaks and their lunches. So I know that we are to discourage, well, they're not allowed to go from room to room. Now, our staff room is right attached to our kitchen. Our kitchen's one end of the room and our staff room is the other. The kitchen and then returning back to the playroom. That's my question. Thanks.
Sorry, Margaret, you're breaking up. Can you try that again?
Okay, so my question is, when staff leave on their break or their lunches, should they choose to leave the building and go out for a walk or whatever, and they come back in, obviously they're going to do the whole hand washing thing. But in our case, our staff and kitchen area are adjoined. There's no walls between. My question is, can the staff go to the staff room on their break or lunch where the cook is there preparing meals?
That would be fine, as long as they're keeping a 2-meter distance from the cook as well as other staff members that may be in the break room at the same time.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Ann Cathcart?
It's just back to the cohort issue. I feel that if the ministry is going to make any exceptions to that number of 10, that they need to put it in writing, because the documents I've seen very clearly say 10. And I think we have to consider, what if we have a staff who doesn't meet the screening and we've got that 7-week window? So I know that I will probably be scheduling less children to allow for a fact that a staff may not be able to come in, and we know not everybody can work every day. So I just feel that if the ministry is going to say, yes, you can have more than 10, they need to put it in writing, because I have several staff that are very concerned about the increased lines and their responsibilities.
So can I jump in there?
Sure.
And if you look at page 7 of the guidelines, of the operational guidelines that the ministry provided, the second bullet point says maximum capacity rules do not apply to special needs resource staff on site. And the example is, if they are not counted towards staff to child ratios, they are not included in the maximum capacity rules. So that's the guidance that they've provided around exceeding that 10.
But what happens if you plan your week with your children and you go over the 10 because a staff is sick, a staff has a death in their family, and that would put in that 7-day period more than 10?
No, it's the children that they're saying you need to keep consistent. But if you have to interchange staff because of illness or something, that you can in fact do that, and that's recognized.
It would be similar to the principles around breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Is that everybody that had their hand up for questions? Did I get everybody? Because I'm having trouble seeing it on my screen. Anne, did you just put your hand up again?
No.
Okay. So is it okay, Caitlin, if I go to some of the questions in the chat, because there's getting to be a few of them?
Sure.
Okay. So one question is, can we sing outside? We're concerned about every cold in the fall. Are we assuming every cold is COVID?
Yes, so to answer the first question, singing outside, if you do plan to do something like that, it would be best if you'd almost have to arrange the children to be at least 2 meters apart from each other and try to not have them facing each other. So it would probably be a difficult task with young children, but if the children are older and can kind of face in one direction and be at least 2 meters apart, then that would be fine. As long as it's outdoors, you don't want to be singing inside. And then can you just remind me what the next question was? Sorry.
Absolutely. Every cold in the fall, are we assuming that it's COVID?
So as of right now, we don't know what the fall is going to look like for the COVID pandemic. So my answer right now is yes, you'll have to assume that every cold in the fall is COVID. However, there are some things that will happen. So if a child presents with cold-like symptoms, they would be referred for testing. They got tested. If it's negative, then we would recommend that the child returns to the daycare 24 hours after symptoms resolve. So hopefully COVID is done by then and we don't have to consider that, but there are some risks that we need to look at, such as second waves and things like that. And it's always better to err on the side of caution. You don't want an outbreak situation, even if it's just a respiratory outbreak. It can cause a lot of anxiety, especially amongst parents.
Thank you. And there's another question here about the screening reports. Are we able to complete them in a fillable document on a tablet and keep the records electronically? This person's thinking of the trees.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, as long as they're just kept on site and you have access to those, then that's totally fine.
Okay, great. I feel like maybe Jen King, your question was answered. And Danielle, are you feeling like your questions were answered?
I just wanted some clarification because Sandra was kind of saying one thing and then so if we have our resource consultant come in to see one of our children, then we can have 11 in the room?
Caitlin
or Sandra?
Anybody?
Maybe somebody's mic's turned off.
Yeah, sorry.
I can jump in. Yeah, that's what the document says on page 6. Or sorry, page 7.
And it also says, yeah, okay, that's good. It also says that because they're not included in the ratio, right? Staff to child ratio. Yep. Our enhanced staff is not included in ratio either.
No, but they're attending. they're attending in the room all day long, right? It's
Okay.
not a visit. They're not considered a visitor.
Okay, so if it's a visitor, we can go to 11.
If
But
it's
not
just
the-
for the purpose of resource teachers,
Yes.
or if you
Okay.
have like the health unit come in or an inspector come in,
Okay.
then they are, would be part of that category.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen has, do we not have to have a supply staff assigned for each cohort? If so, does this person count in the 10 on top of the other educators in the group, example, 7 children and 3 staff?
So if it's a supply teacher coming in like regularly, or?
Jen, do you want to speak to your question?
I guess
if someone is sick or on vacation, for example, she's written.
Yeah, so it's the same principles that we kind of discussed with the break. So
Okay.
If you have a supply teacher coming in to cover from somebody, as long as the maximum capacity of the room is under 10, then that's fine. Of course, there has to be some flexibility applied to cohorts when people get sick or life happens, right? So
right.
That's, yeah.
So I'm just reading comments. It seems like people are still a bit confused. It says the document says enhanced staff do not count in the 10 question mark.
So again, all we can really say is on page 7, maximum capacity rules do not apply to special needs resource staff. I don't know about enhanced staff.
Sandra,
where is that seen? Where's the reference to enhanced staff? What page?
Does anybody know that?
I'm reading it on page 20, and it just says that it doesn't. The maximum capacity rules do not include your SNR consultants and enhanced staff.
Yeah, I'll have to seek clarification on that. I have a call today with our program advisor following this one, and so I can ask specifically around that. But, I might defer to the health unit for, guidance on that particular one, because that individual is going to be with the child all day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. I feel like there was one more question. Sorry, Ema wants to know if the children can sing with masks on.
So the issue with using masks for kids is you're not sure when they're going to come off, how they're taken off, that kind of thing. You could theoretically do that, but it would be very difficult to ensure, for instance, that the mask is always covering the child's mouth when they're singing, that it's covering their whole face, that they're taking it off properly. So again, the best kind of option for you would to ensure singing goes on outside. Or if you have kind of a big gym space and they can be more than 2 meters apart, that would be okay. But kind of better safe than sorry with COVID is always the best route of thinking. So trying to avoid those situations as much as possible.
Thank you, Caitlin. Have I missed anybody's questions?
Danielle, do you have a question?
Just a clarification, because Jill is saying no new staff in the building in a 7-day period, which I understand that. So if I have a staff that goes off for a day and I bring in a supply staff, does that mean that then the staff can't come back for 7 days because there's no new people? Or is she not considered a new person because she was already there that week?
So I think it's kind of the same answers that we already touch based on, yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. So I think we can move on to the next section. So that's section 3, use of masks and PPE. Just to note that masks aren't recommended for children, particularly those under 2. So if a child becomes sick at the daycare, you can offer them a mask if they're able to tolerate it. But it can cause them anxiety and things like that. So it's not expected of the child. Some of the most important things is just making sure that staff know where all the masks are stored, that staff have quick access to masks. So if you have multiple classrooms, making sure that each classroom is equipped with masks. Document and monitor your quantity of PPE, and try and make sure that staff are conserving PPE. Staff should be trained on how to don and doff PPE, and there's actually really helpful videos on Public Health Ontario that I kind of touched base on, and they kind of go over how to put on PPE and take it off properly. And they even go through, so for instance, daycare staff wouldn't be required to wear gowns like a nurse would. So they have a specific video for how staff can put on masks, eye protection and gloves, and then take it off, just those 3 items, which is very helpful. And then in our video, we do talk a lot about hand hygiene and just try and make sure that it's always performed and promoted throughout the facility amongst children and staff. Of course, you do that throughout the year, but next section.
We have a question, a question asking, can staff refuse PPE?
So that would actually be up to the facility. If staff refuses PPE, a situation where they would wear PPE is caring for a sick child. So if somebody refuses to wear PPE, it would actually be best to just assign another staff member who would wear PPE to that child.
Does that answer your question, Ema? Yeah.
So if you're, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Danielle, do you have a question?
Nope. Is my hand still up?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ema. And somebody has also written, can we add this to the document? For example, ensure garbages are foot pedal open. Only accept diapers from families if they are sealed and unopened. If you store your cots in the playroom, cover them with a clean sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. You can add anything to the document. We just ask that you don't change the wording that's on there right now. But you can absolutely add things to it that really reflect your facility and kind of common situations that you guys encounter.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to cleaning and disinfection. So frequently touched surfaces should be cleaned at least twice a day, including doorknobs, water fountain knobs, light switches, areas where kids would be touching a lot. Electronic devices should be cleaned after each child uses them and between uses. Now, in terms of timing of these cleanings, it would be best to do one clean before children arrive, and then perhaps one around the lunch hour. As long as it's done a minimum of 2 days. Staff should be assigned to cleaning, and you should keep a cleaning log just to make sure that you're cleaning and disinfecting regularly, and you can keep track of that easily. Health Canada does have a really helpful website on approved disinfectants that are effective on COVID, and I think it has over 450 products on it now, and it's updated very regularly. in the training video, I talk about some things to consider with disinfectants, such as how long they have to remain on surfaces for. That's just something to look at when you're actually picking a product, because you don't want something that you have to wait 3 minutes after it dries for people to go ahead and use it. That wouldn't really be suitable in a daycare setting. So just keeping those things in mind. Linen, yeah.
Sorry, one of the questions is, can our cook be the cleaner as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yep. It's kind of staff assignments for that kind of thing would be really up to you. So linens are laundered after each use, of course, and if you are able to, it'd be great if you could have children assigned to a cot or a crib every week, so that they're using the same cot or crib every week, and just ensuring that cot covers are laundered weekly. In terms of space setup, so as I've mentioned a few times, and I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing it in the news and things like that, but physical distancing. So even with cohorts, do your best to try and maintain a distance of 2 meters between yourself and the kids, and try and encourage kids to keep that distance as well. Don't mix with other cohorts, so ensure that cohorts are required to maintain a distance of 2 meters from each other, especially when they're sharing outdoor spaces. And if they're sharing something like an indoor space, there should be kind of a physical separator between them. So some gymnasiums will have those big plastic curtain type things that come down. Cohorts can use the gym at the same time, as long as there's that physical barrier. So the best kind of plan of action for that is using scheduled times for common areas. And then physical distancing. Yeah.
Sorry, there's a question about the cots.
Sure.
So you had mentioned to wash sheets each week, and this individual is saying that cots are stacked after sleep each day. So should we do the sheets each day?
So linens should be laundered after each use, so daily. But actual cot covers should be just laundered weekly.
Thank you.
I don't think you understand the question, because we always change the sheets as needed, and then we always and we change them weekly. That's just part of the Early Learning Act. But her question, the way I understand it, is our cots are all stacked, okay? And so you're saying, yes, you can wash the bedding weekly, but you need to wash the linens daily. And I think that's what's confusing. Well, it is to me anyway.
Thank you, Margaret. That makes sense.
So, okay, so the cots are stacked. What does that have to do with cleaning the linens, though?
They're stacked with the linens on it. So Johnny has a cot. He's got a covering for we call them sheets, and then he's got a blanket. And unless he's had an accident, we stack them. Now, in our case, they're in an enclosed cupboard, and then we take them out the next day. So does that still meet what you're expecting of us, or do you want us to strip the kids every day and wash all the what we call sheets and blankets?
Yeah, so the sheets and blankets definitely need to be cleaned after each use, but not necessarily the whole entire cot itself.
Margaret, you got the answer? Hello?
Hi, Ravi.
Yeah, Margaret, Caitlin answered you. You got the answer, Margaret.
Okay, I'm still with big question marks here. So I need it in simple language.
Let's explain you that.
The cot sheet. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, yes or no, do we need to strip the sheets and the blankets off the bed every day and wash them all.
Yes.
Okay, that's right. If you think that something has seeped down, right, to the cot, consider when we actually one of the students or the child has peed and it has contaminated the cot, then you would clean and sanitize the cot. Margaret, go.
Sorry, I
Ravi, you're breaking up a bit.
couldn't hear what word you said.
Margaret, the linen has, as Caitlin says, that the linen has to be washed after each use, right? Now, you're talking about the accident, soiling the linen. If there is consider if you find that there is a seepage which contaminated the cot, then you would clean and sanitize the cot too. That's what.
Okay, my question truly wasn't about seepage. My question was, when we get the children up from their nap, we need to strip the bed and wash the sheet, because I read it was weekly or as needed, but maybe I read it wrong.
Nope. The bed should be stripped and laundered after each use, so daily.
Right.
So, just moving back to space setup and physical distancing, shared spaces such as things like outdoor sandboxes that can't be cleaned and disinfected should not be used, unfortunately. But if you have a play structure, for instance, on the daycare premises that you know that the community isn't using, one cohort at a time can use that play structure. And if you're using things like balls and other toys outside, just make sure that you're following the same principles as you would for indoor toy use. So toys and equipment are cleaned and disinfected at a minimum between cohorts. It is best to disinfect toys between use and between children. Not always easy in a daycare setting with 8 to 10 children running around, but do your best and just make sure that a staff member is assigned to that. Sensory materials should be single use and should be assigned to a child. If you have shared sensory items, you should try and avoid to use them. You're really not supposed to use them according to the operational guidance document. Play structures, as I mentioned, should be used by one cohort at a time. And one way to do this is make a schedule for each cohort to use the play structure. When you're holding an infant, use a blanket or a cloth and make sure that the blanket or cloth is replaced between holding different infants. Clean linen stored in sanitary conditions. Laundry bin should be in each room so that staff can just throw the blanket in the laundry bin quickly. And avoid getting close to faces of children whenever possible. So not too much cuddling of the little guys.
We have a few questions. Is it one of them's referring to what you've just been talking about? So could I just go through some of those questions?
For sure.
Can I have rotating bins for books and puzzles that change each day?
So it's actually encouraged that things like books aren't used and shared by children, unfortunately, just because they are difficult to clean unless they're kind of those plastic type books or easy to wipe down. But if it's pages in it, that makes it really difficult to clean unless a staff is actually reading to the children.
Can I jump in because it was my question?
Mm-hmm.
I just read further on, and if we have a sick child and we send them home, then we have to take everything, we have to take stuff out of the room for 7 days.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering if I have a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday box and they don't come out until 7 days later, or are you saying because a child reads a book at 9 a.m. and I can't sanitize it for the next child at 9:30, I can't use that?
Yes. So it's almost two different situations. So if you have
Okay.
a child in your class that becomes symptomatic and they've been using different toys and things that can't be cleaned that easy, then you are to store them for 7 days and not use them.
Right.
If it's in a regular setting, no kids are sick, then that's a situation where you can just clean it and the other children can use it. That's no problem. You don't
So
have
if I
to switch bins or anything like that.
So if I give Johnny a book and he reads it at 9 and I take it away and he's done with it, so then I put it up and we don't use that for another week, I can give Sally a different book?
That would, yeah. I mean, it's tricky with the books,
Okay.
right? But they're
Yeah.
totally discouraged unless they can be cleaned easily.
So I'm going to the dollar store and buying all the
could theoretically take that if you wanted kids to be assigned to different books, then yes, you could have a child read a book, take it out of the rotation for a week, and then put it back in the next week.
Okay, thank you. The next question that Becky's probably going to read is mine as well. So when I put a blanket over me to hold on to Johnny, and then I'm done with Johnny, can I like hang up his blanket or put it in his specific cubby, and then an hour later when Johnny needs me, I can just pull out his blanket and put it on me?
That would be fine, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That would be fine.
Caitlin, I'm just going back because there was a question a while ago and I'm trying to find it. It's about their room doesn't have a door to separate children, so do they need a barrier, something to that effect? Having trouble finding it.
So there's no, I guess I could say that there is no requirement of a door or anything like that, as long as one cohort is assigned to each room and that they're, of course, at least 2 meters from another cohort, then that's fine.
Okay, thank you. And there's a number of operators here who are indicating that their playgrounds are primarily sand. That's their surface. It's not just a little sandbox, but the majority of the surface is sand. So how do they handle that?
Yeah, so one suggestion I would have is don't have sandbox toys outside. Try and discourage kids from actually handling the sand, but of course they can run around in the sand if that's where the play structure is. I know that's difficult to enforce, and of course do your best as you do with anything, but really you're thinking, okay, I don't want 6 kids kind of building a sandcastle together, because 1, they're not maintaining physical distancing, and 2, it's impossible to sanitize the sand. So just keeping that in mind, try and encourage kids not to all play in the sand with their hands.
Okay, thank you. And then Jill had a question about, can we not use individual buckets? Was that in reference to sensory stuff, Jill?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even with the buckets, because you still can't sanitize the sand for next use unless that child is assigned to that bucket, then that would be fine. Yeah. Yep. That could work.
Okay, so I think that was what she had the intention of. Great.
And then so section 8 is food provisions. So no self-serve food, and try to avoid food sharing, of course. Meals should be served in individual portions. And if you're making food with the kids, they should have everything ready to go right in front of them. It should already be proportioned for them. Ensure good hand hygiene, of course, and then try and set kids up so they are at least 2 meters apart when they're eating, if possible. So that would mean staggering dining area times and making sure that they have enough space to eat, essentially, and have children wash their hands. I know that's common practice in a daycare already, but having the kids wash their hands or sanitize their hands before any meals and snacks, as well as afterwards.
Caitlin, I have another question here.
Yeah.
What about when the children's bathroom is shared between two rooms? Do we need a floor to ceiling barrier to split it up?
If the bathroom is shared between two rooms, it would be fine as long as staff are able to ensure that two kids from two different cohorts at the same time are going in together and running around the bathroom together. You just want to make sure that either the kids using the bathroom at that time are from the same cohort, or they're at least 2 meters apart.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that?
Have I missed anyone's questions in the chat? Sorry, there's a lot.
I have my hand up. I just have a question around the food that you were talking about. Individual servings. I mean, obviously Johnny has his own plate and Sally has her own plate. But if the salad comes out in one big bowl and the staff can serve it to each child, or does my cook need to plate everything in the kitchen and then bring it out? Because therefore then the cook is touching everything.
So staff can serve the child. It's as long as the child isn't serving themselves.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So moving on to staff training, as I've discussed, the video's up online, but just making sure that staff are familiar with your own policies and procedures. A lot of this stuff will be a big change for them. So going over things you've added to the policies and procedures that Sandra handed out, making sure they review the video, and then depending on what their assignment looks like, having them look at the Public Health Ontario videos to ensure they're familiar with donning and doffing. And then just make sure that staff are aware of the process of if they become sick or if a child becomes sick in the room, so that it's a smooth process and everybody is kept safe. And then another really important thing for operators to go over with staff is the actual documentation. So no matter whether it's on paper or electronically, make sure to thoroughly go over with staff what you want captured for attendance and cleaning and any other documentation you might want them to keep. As much detail as you need, and just making sure that they're doing it regularly. In terms of
Sorry, we have another question. Is it recommended that clients sign a document releasing the agency of any risk of contacting COVID?
So that's kind of a legal question, and I wouldn't be able to speak to that.
Maybe something you ask your lawyer or your board of directors. Okay. And there's also another question. Do we also do screening at pickup when parents come?
So no, you do not have to do that as long as the parent isn't entering the building to pick up the child. If it's an outdoor pickup, that's fine. Or if you can have a staff member waiting for the parents, and as the parents show up, they can run and grab the staff member can run and grab the child, then you wouldn't have to do screening at that point.
Thank you.
It's only whenever somebody enters the building, basically. So for visitors, just making sure that there's no non-essential visitors at the program, no volunteers or students, unfortunately, at this time. And then anybody from the ministry or public health should be screened when they're entering the premises, and they should wear appropriate PPE. So you may require anybody who's required to visit to throw on a mask. and just make sure that they're aware of your particular protocols, so they can keep your staff and kids safe. Another question?
Yes, when checking ID at pickup, what should be considered?
Checking ID at pickup. So I guess my question is, do parents have to show ID in order to pick up a child, or is that common practice?
I'm going to let the person who asked the question refer to that, please.
Yeah, so if we have a pickup person, like if mom got held up at work and Uncle Johnny comes and we don't know him, he's on our pickup list, but we would need to check ID. There would be physical contact, and so I'm wondering what measures should be put into place for that.
So one thing that you could do is just have a bin handy at the screening station, so that whoever is picking up the child can throw their ID in the bin, and then the screener takes a look at their ID, make sure everything checks out, puts the ID back in the bin, and then performs hand hygiene. So you're trying to, I think you see it in some stores, is they're trying to maintain that 2-meter distance. So you will want to avoid your screeners actually having to take the ID out of that person's hand. It would be best if they could use a bin, or if Uncle Johnny just throws the ID on the table and then the screener picks it up, puts it down, Uncle Johnny picks it up, and then you perform hand hygiene. That would be ideal.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Caitlin.
just call into that. What if they just showed it across the barrier? Like if you had a barrier, just have them hold it up. I've had that happen at the CVS.
Yeah, that's totally fine too. If you have the plexiglass barrier at your screening station, that would totally work.
Great, thank you. We have another question. If I have a staff that's in her 60s and diabetic, asthmatic, should you consider she not come in?
So I believe right now the ministry is recommending that anybody over 70 or anybody that's immunocompromised continue to self-isolate. So if the staff member is comfortable with coming in, there's no real restrictions around that person having to isolate or stay away from the daycare.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Have I missed any questions that are out there? I think we're good.
Okay, so a lot of the information that I just went through that checklist with you is captured in greater detail in the policies. I don't think that we should go through the policies again because you'll know a lot of the information. But just make sure that you review all the policies that Sandra sent out. Again, you can add to them to suit your facility's needs. You can add sentences in the middle of paragraphs and things like that, but just make sure that you're not changing the wording of what's already there. So in total, there is 4 policies, I believe. And they're all very good. They're all step-by-step, and you can alter these however you want. And everything in those policies is briefly captured in the checklist. A lot of the stuff we already checked on. So it's more just a matter of if you have any questions around the details in the policies, I'd be happy to answer. Does anybody have any questions? Did anybody get a chance to review the policies and need any clarification? We probably answered a lot of questions in our review of the checklist, but.
We do have another question in the chat saying if we have an outbreak in one room, so this program has 5 rooms, Is that one room closed or the entire center?
So in an outbreak situation, public health would assess the risk of transmission. So we would look at things like the layout of the building, if there was any contact between different cohorts, what that contact looked like. So I can't really say offhand, other than we would definitely make a recommendation whether or not to shut the program down.
So it's something programs might do in conversation with Peterborough Public Health.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. A few more questions in the chat. Can the screener be part of a cohort?
The screener can be part of a cohort. Just make sure that that person is protected when they're screening, because you want that person to be minimally exposed, especially if they're caring for kids.
Right, thank you. Another question, do we staff need a COVID test before we open?
So right now there's no requirements for daycare staff to get tested. This may change in the upcoming weeks. The Ministry of Health released a testing strategy document, and daycares are on there, but there's not really any details at all on what that looks like. But I can tell you that a lot of the emergency childcare centers, or all of the emergency childcare centers in Ontario, did undergo testing, and had it was great, actually. I believe there was one case that came out of screening in all of Ontario. So I'm not sure if that'll affect the ministry's decision on that. But again, just keeping up to date on the ministry's website to make sure that you're aware of any changes. And if anything changed with that, then we would absolutely be in touch with you and just let you know what's going on and give you a heads up and let you know how that would work.
Okay, great. The next question is a ratio question. Rooms can have 10. If my toddler room is licensed for 5, should I be reducing the ratios in that room?
Yes, so I believe in the operational guide, I mean, it doesn't increase the maximum people you can actually provide for under the CCEYA. It's just a maximum of 10 people, if that's who can regularly be in the room. So reduced ratios are permitted as set out under the CCEYA. And then reduced ratios are not permitted at any time for infants. So
does that?
Can I jump in?
Ema?
Sorry, it's Sandra.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandra.
So to Ema's question, Ema, if your room is licensed for 5 children, then that is your maximum number of children in that room. You can't have any more than 10, so you could add your staff on top of that and you'd still be within your cohort of 10. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. But it doesn't make sense because if you're reducing ratios in a larger room so that children can be more at a distance, why in the toddler room that is licensed for 5, they're going to be on top of each other? Why is that allowed?
I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
That's honest. I guess we just have to go with what has been shared with us by the ministry. We have a question here. Can a face shield replace a mask, or are both needed?
So it would be, if all you have access is to face shields and masks, the person, if a staff member is caring for a sick child, they should be wearing both a mask and a face shield. Face shields kind of replace eye protection, actually. So they either have to wear both a face shield and a mask, or eye protection and a mask.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions at this time.
Okay. So Sandra, I just wanted to touch on one last thing. Sandra also sent out posters and documents last night. So one is on hand sanitizing, one is hand washing. There's a document on cleaning and disinfection for public settings. So they're in that second email, and those posters and kind of info sheets, I guess I should call them, should be posted around the facility. And that's just to do as we kind of mentioned already, and encourage staff and kids to be performing regular hand hygiene, making sure that that's all carried out correctly, and just as a little friendly reminder.
Thank you, Caitlin. I spoke too soon about the questions in the chat.
No, that's
so
okay.
Another one is, what about carpets? Do they all need to be removed? And what if we have carpets that are permanent?
So carpets don't necessarily have to be removed if they're permanent. Ideally, you would have a surface that's easily cleaned. But if it's permanent, you're not expected to take that out.
Okay, thank you. And then there are questions about, can we use fans and air conditioners in the rooms?
Yep, so there's no restrictions on air conditioners or fans in the operational guidance document.
Thank you.
I have a question. Given that COVID is respiratory and that it's in the air, if we have a case and it's tested positive, what happens to like my paper material that is inside of like my shelving and stuff like that for the educators? Do I have to like not touch anything for 14 days? Or?
No, so COVID is actually transmitted through respiratory droplets. So a case would actually have to sneeze or cough within 2 meters of those documents for those documents to be considered contaminated. And then what you would do is, say, for instance, somebody did cough or sneeze onto a book, and then the next day they test positive for COVID. You would take that book and put it in storage for 7 days.
Thank you.
Moira has a question. Can you clarify that are we to take area carpets out of the room?
So if you're able to, if you have, for instance, an area rug, then yes, it would be great if you could remove it just so that the floors can be disinfected a little bit easier. But if they're permanent, you don't have to.
Any other questions?
In terms of decals for the floor for like, little feet or something like that, is that okay to keep, or do we have to remove them every night to have the floors washed properly?
Are they like stickers or something that go on the? Okay, that would be fine. You can keep those on the floor as long as they're not like touched really frequently, and if you're not removing them, then the cleaner isn't able to kind of sanitize them easy enough, then they're fine.
Okay.
Any other questions? There's a comment in the chat that says, this is an amazing presentation. Thank you for your support and guidance.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to say that I am available to support you guys if you have general questions on implementing these policies. My contact information is available in the training presentation that's on YouTube, but I'll also forward it off to Becky or Sandra, just so you have it available. But if you have specific questions that are more like around the layout of your facility and things like that, it would be best to ask your public health inspector, Ravi or Brian, because they know you guys best. So.
Thank you. And Sandra, did I see your hand up?
I just wanted to do a wrap up once we're done with the questions.
Okay. Any final questions? Just more feedback in the chat saying thank you. This was very helpful. I guess, Sandra, you could go ahead with your final comments.
Sure, thanks, Becky. So I just really want to take this opportunity to thank Caitlin and Brian and Ravi and other folks at the health unit who have supported us in creating these documents and reviewing them, and for your time today and the opportunity for operators to have to answer questions specific that they have. I'm sure that it will have been especially helpful for them. And so I did want to give just a couple of reminders. If you look at the guide to reopening, Caitlin's contact information is on the last page. And so as she has offered, feel free to reach out to her. Just a reminder that there are 5 policies that staff must review prior to reopening, and you must also share with your families. And that's information that you'll have to provide to your licensing PA when you post your request to reopen. In terms of, just wanted to double back on the staff testing. So if the ministry does decide that staff are to be tested at any point, our experience with the emergency childcare was that you had to report it as a serious occurrence, but you made one report and you identified how many staff had been tested. So I expect that that will be a similar process should staff have to be tested as we move forward. In relation to the serious occurrence reporting, any serious occurrence reporting you do related to COVID and a suspected case of COVID must be shared. You must notify the health unit, you must notify licensing, and you must also notify the CMSM with the details related to, we don't need the child's name, but what group are they in, how many children were in attendance, and then we need, then we'll follow the serious occurrence after that. But it's just to give us a heads up if we know we're going to have an impact in our community and the nature of the impact. And then as far as posters go, Sylvia, as I mentioned in the guide to reopening, has put together startup kits. There will be laminated copies of the posters. We're probably only doing like one set for each site, but they will be available in there. You have the electronic copies, so you can make your own copies if you want to do more copies. We will have the touchless thermometers, one for each full day program, and there is some hand sanitizer. So once you know your reopening date, please contact Sylvia and make arrangements to have that kit picked up. And you can pick it all up at once from our office. So I just wanted to offer those few little things. And finally, I did want to give you a bit of an update related to funding. As we work through, looking at considering how best to determine how we will fund for the reopen period, which will be from June 15th to probably the end of August. We are going to need some information from the operators. We have to understand, under normal circumstances, normal operating circumstances, what is your operating budget? And then what will be your new budget based on your reopening model? So understanding that you're going to have fewer children enrolled and a lower operating capacity. And so we are aiming to send you a financial template on Friday. There is a very fast turnaround on this. We're asking for it. Whenever it comes out, we're going to give you a week. So we're aiming for a week return on it. That will allow us time to process it and then understand what will be the financial needs for reopening coupled with the closure period. And so this is the only way we can determine what those costs are going to be and the expenses to us as a municipality. And if we don't do it quickly, we're not going to be able to provide you the answers that you're looking for in order to make those decisions around reopening. And so you can watch for that. It will come out from Brandy. And we, as I said, we're aiming to have that out on Friday of this week. And I don't know if there's any questions related to that, but I'll open it up one last time for questions if anyone has any.
There is a question in the chat, and then I see Anne has her hand up. I heard through the Pediatric Association that touchless thermometers for children under 5 do not give accurate readings, ?
So that's actually something I would have to look into. I can definitely look into that and get back to you. I think in these situations, it is kind of difficult because you want the screener to be at that 2-meter distance. So of course, touchless thermometers are ideal. They're easy to use. They're great. But I can definitely look into whether or not they're recommended for screening or not. And I'll share that answer with you guys.
I can add just a bit of information related to the emergency childcare experience. This was shared by Shannon and Cheryl and Trish. If you're screening outdoors and it's a hot day, they have had some inaccurate readings with the touchless thermometers. So if you are screening outdoors, try and find a shaded area, and you may also then want to have a backup thermometer with the ear caps, disposable ear caps, to double check it if you're concerned about that at all.
Thank you. And I think I saw that Anne had her hand up.
Hi, Sandra. I understand from an email from Sylvia that we won't be able to pick up our PPE until we give an opening date. But is there any chance to just get quantities? Because as we're ordering in supplies, it would be nice to know how much we are going to get.
So yes, so we are providing enough for startup. So 1 box of gloves, 1 box of masks, and I believe there's like a 50 pair of gloves and 50 masks. I can have Sylvia confirm the quantity in each box. And there's a 1 liter bottle of hand sanitizer. And there's 2, I believe, 2 or 3 face shields. And then the touchless thermometer.
Thank you.
But I will ask her to send out an email with the quantity of each box. But you will have to source your PPE beyond that need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jen King has a question. Does the hand sanitizer need to be wall-mounted one or touchless?
There's no specific requirements on the hand sanitizer other than they have to be in each of the rooms and at the screening station.
Thank you. Any final questions? Have I missed anybody's questions?
I have one more about the hand sanitizer. So correct me if I'm wrong here. The way I understand it, after you've done the screening, then if a staff member comes to take that child to the playroom, do we have to squirt them with hand sanitizer, or can that staff take them immediately to the bathroom before they enter the playroom and do a hand washing cycle? I'm worried that hands in their mouths, right? And I don't know, maybe I'm worrying too much.
So I just need to clarify. So can the child use the hand sanitizer, you mean once they're in the classroom rather than using it at the screening station?
No, I mean, do we use the hand sanitizer on the kids at the cleaning station, or is it okay to take like kids put their hands in their mouths? And I guess my worry is, especially with the real little ones, they're going to put their hands in their mouths. So to me, it would make more sense in our case, because our bathroom is separate from the playroom, I was thinking the staff who's taking the child before she takes them into the playroom, if she could take them to the bathroom and have them hand wash.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fine. Just one consideration, if it's the screener that's taking the child, and for instance, if the child needs their hand held down to the classroom, you want the child to perform quick hand hygiene with the sanitizer. And then that staff member can either take them to the cleaning station or take them to the classroom. But that's totally fine, taking them to the cleaning station before the classroom. That would be great, actually.
Sorry, somebody had their hand up. Was it Amanda?
It is, thanks.
Thank you.
I know that we were talking about barriers, and I'm understanding from that we may not need it, but I was speaking with the ministry this week, and she mentioned that at our one site, we would need to look at barriers to our classrooms because they don't have doors.
So from what I understand, as long as it's separate classrooms and the kids are coming within 2 meters of each other, then you wouldn't necessarily need a doorway. But I can look into.
I have just when I was talking to her, because I told her I'd mention it to the other supervisors. It's in the special rules relating to the coronavirus. It's it's point 8. It says each licensed age group is separated by a floor to ceiling barrier while indoors. So I don't know
if that would be like if they're sharing a common area. So like we talked about with the gymnasium, if you have access to a gymnasium, 2 cohorts can use the gymnasium as long as there's that physical barrier between the cohorts.
Okay.
Yeah. I can look into that further though and see if I can get an answer out to you guys.
Yeah, this is Brian. I think it's any sort of indoor space. If you have one of those larger rooms, like within a daycare center, you'll need to have like a physical barrier. And around that question earlier on about the sharing of bathrooms, I know that's kind of common. The bathrooms are one of those areas that I would see as kind of critical. So as much as possible, and I think what Caitlin said as well, if you can't separate the shared bathrooms, maybe have some sort of staggering of the kids being brought in and out. But as much as possible, you really want to have the separation, the physical separation, like in any of the interior spaces. Between the cohorts, if you have 2 cohorts, like if you have a larger room, that's the way I kind of see it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question, can all children, regardless of their age, use hand sanitizer?
Hi.
Yeah. I just think the trouble with using hand sanitizer on an infant is it can be a little bit tricky to just get those commonly missed areas. So sometimes full hand washing is the best. But if you're confident that you can ensure that every area of the infant's hands are covered or the toddler's hands, then that's fine.
Thank you. Final questions. Thank you very much, Caitlin and Sandra, for all of your work and preparing documents and, sorry, my phone's going off, and preparing this presentation today. It was really informative. And just asking your advice on, so we've recorded the session, which I'll stop in a few minutes. Would you say that once we have it uploaded, if we email it to everyone on that would be suitable?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Becky and Ellen, for hosting. I really appreciate your assistance. And being able to, host the meeting this way through Teams has been really great opportunity to connect. And so thank you for all your support as well.
Absolutely, no problem. Sorry about all the hiccups.
Oh, no, it went pretty smooth, I would say.
Well, the hiccups yesterday I was talking about.
Oh, wow. That's our new life, right?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thanks,
I'm going to
everyone.
stop the record button and have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. You too.